Liz, I'm obviously fascinated with personal branding, but what I'm particularly interested and excited about our conversation is that you left the world of pitching to traditional media to really do a deep dive and a focus into podcast land. And so what I wanted to ask you is what is different about personal branding in terms of personal branding within the context of leaders appearing on podcasts as opposed to other traditional channels?
I think with other traditional channels, and you will know working from, traditional PR too, the message is hardly ever coming directly from the person themselves. It's a lot of times written from their end. It comes to our side on the PR company. We refine it from there. Then we send it to the editor. There's more refining on their end. So by the time you actually are reading the article or the piece, there's so many filters already layered on it. So I kind of compare it to like an Instagram filter. You see somebody on there and then you see them in real life and they don't look anything like that. I think that's something, and I would say the same with TV and radio, although that is a little bit different because, and we'll talk about that later in terms of attention span, long form versus short form. But with podcasting, I think that is really an opportunity for you to personally let your personal brand, your personality shine through. People can see you for who you are, your mannerisms, your background. And I think ultimately that just lends to being a lot more authentic and to letting audiences connect with you in a different way and on a different scale. You're reaching different audiences now too, just because a lot of people don't have time to sit down and read long form content. We're all busy, we're driving, we're on the bus, we're going to work. So, audio definitely lends itself to more accessibility as well.
How do you build one coherent personal brand? Personal branding has been around forever. I mean, leaders had to get elected, right? Going back to tribal times. But how do you build one personal brand when every platform, podcasts are one of them, but there's LinkedIn, there's Instagram, there's TikTok, there's my newsletter, right? My website.
Right.
And we're so siloed. How do I create one personal brand when I kind of have different audiences with different mindsets at the time that they're consuming? When I'm on TikTok, I ain't thinking the same way when I'm on LinkedIn.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think one thing that people get wrong when it comes to all of these multiple platforms and different types of content isn't that you don't have to change your brand or create a bunch of multiple personalities or multiple contexts, for all of these different things. You just have to change the format. You need a clear core that's going to adapt to the context of every different platform. Also, I think, with TikTok, LinkedIn, podcasts, all of those things, you have to keep in mind that people are showing up in different emotional and cognitive states. They're showing up for different reasons. So, like with TikTok, you need to make it a little bit more grabby, a little bit more entertaining. Like they're there for like quick content. A lot of times they're just there for entertainment. So that's a little bit more short form. You have like 1 or 2 seconds to grab their attention, right? Versus LinkedIn, where people are trying to look for learning and authority. That's more where you can show that different, more professional side of yourself. And I'm not saying don't be professional on TikTok or anything like that. But that's also, I think, where you can kind of like lean more into the jargon and what it is that you're trying to do in a longer form content, as you can do with podcasting as well. And ultimately just still be yourself across all the platforms. Don't try to be something different for each audience. But definitely keep in mind, if somebody's going to be on LinkedIn, they're looking for something different versus if they're on Instagram or TikTok. That's going to be a little bit more entertaining, more short form.
Pitching has been around forever in PR, pitching newspapers. I just pitched a newsletter and successfully landed a story within a news. So we pitch everywhere. But you're also at the mercy of the algorithms these days when you're making a pitch. I think it was Jonathan Mast was a guest on one of our episodes, Farzana. Said, I think it was Jonathan said 52% of internet traffic now is bots. So the algorithm is our biggest audience, so to speak. I'm at the mercy of Google. You might have a YouTube channel, but you're at the mercy of YouTube, which is also Google. You might have a podcast, but you're at the mercy of the apps, Spotify, Apple, Castbox, Castro. What does it mean to build a personal brand when the platforms are interpreting and distributing you? Never mind the people.
Right. That's a really great question. And that's something that I personally have come across and struggled with, promoting my personal music brand across Instagram and TikTok and things like that. Yeah,
because
definitely.
You've cut albums, you've so to speak, right? I don't know if albums get cut. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, for better or worse, algorithms are now definitely a part of the brand ecosystem. They're not just distributing content, they're also interpreting patterns, what you talk about, how consistently you're posting, how people respond to that. I definitely have seen when I'm posting more consistently, when I'm boosting, my posts and getting a lot more responses, the algorithm spreads it a lot more and I get more attention from that. Once I stop, once the album has dropped and 6 months down the line, I'm feeling a little lazy and I haven't posted for a long time. And again, I'm using myself as an example here. Once I make a post a month later, the algorithm is not sharing it nearly as much. Yeah. Also, something else, I think these algorithms and also large language models, which we can touch on in a second, I think it's pushing creators and brands more and more towards clarity, specificity, and usefulness, not just buzzwords. That means that, clarity and repetition matters more than perfection. And I think that's also part of personal branding, right? Is authenticity and consistency across not only time, but also across all platforms as you're building your digital library, if you will. So, owning your channel still matters, but you have to understand how different platforms read you and when they decide to show you. And you can do all sorts of deep dives into each particular one to see, how to master the algorithm if you want to do that individual research. Money also helps,
Right. Promo. That's actually not to be forgotten, right? Yeah. A little bit of cash helps push you in front of people.
And I think that's one thing, too, that still stands to fact. Social media, all of these platforms has definitely made personal branding more accessible, reaching different audiences. But ultimately, having a PR team behind you, having money to boost, your campaigns online, no matter what, we're still boosting campaigns. Each post you make, think of it as a campaign. So at the end of the day, yeah, money does still matter. It still helps to help those algorithms notice you, if you will. But ultimately, yes, clarity, consistency, that's always going to help too.
Farzana, I'd ask you to take your earbuds out here so you can't hear me talking. But my question is actually for you. So my hero on the personal branding side, Farzana, is kind of becoming you, because you have a podcast. You sort of had two podcasts that you do, this one and then the Week Unspun. I know that's a huge time commitment. I see you in my socials all the time. You're at events every night. You're traveling to Sri Lanka. You're going overseas. You're in New York a ton. You're managing social channels, website. How are you seeing the way people read your brand differently across different channels?
I think it's interesting because in PR, one of our sort of classic cornerstones is third-party endorsement. So for a long time as PRs, we've always been trained that actually the credibility comes from earning from the gatekeepers, from the journalists, and and or the conference organizers that invite you in to speak at a conference, or an award jury that awards you this great win. So the podcast area has been really fascinating because people are able to have their own podcast. They don't need to earn the right to be on a podcast necessarily, because actually, as Liz said, it's increasingly accessible. And what is quite interesting is actually it shows that trust can be earned. When you don't have a third-party endorsement, you can actually earn trust by showing up, being authentic and connecting. And people have done that through just social media lives. People are doing that through podcasts. And I think it also people build emotional relationships, in particular, I think, with podcast hosts and guests, because it is super intimate to have, people's voices in your mind. And as one of our guests said earlier, it also tends to be quite solitary. So you listen to podcasts by yourself as opposed to, with your friends and family watching a TV screen. So it's a very personal experience to tune into podcasts. And I think that sort of lends itself. And I don't know, Liz, if you could share with us, any of your thoughts, respects to the fact that audio is a very intimate and sort of trust building medium.
It certainly is. And, when you were talking about traditional PR too, how, winning awards, the publications that you're on, all of those things is kind of borrowing authority from the establishment that gave you the award, from the publication that published your piece. I think likewise with podcasting, when you appear on a podcast, you are borrowing the authority and the trust of that host and of their audience. And they're already, to your point, so much more emotionally invested with that host, with the stories that they tell, that I think it's just more impactful and, again, more authentic when you're able to connect across video or audio. But to your point, Farzana, video, we're oftentimes watching that with friends and family. Audio, we're doing it by ourselves with headphones, so we truly get to process it by ourselves in our own thoughts without, outside voices throwing in their multiple opinions and distracting you from the core message of what it is that you're listening to.
Let me ask the obvious question about personal branding. Why does it matter? Why don't I just make a great product or a great service, offer a reasonable price?
Well, let's look at Elon Musk as an example. He has a lot of great products out there. Everybody loved Tesla for a really long time. He actually had a pretty good personal brand for a while. And then he's kind of, I don't want to say gone off the rails, but his personal brand has changed a lot over the past couple of years. And as such, we have seen Tesla struggling. I think a lot of his products and companies have been facing a lot more backlash than they would have otherwise. And it's not because of the products themselves, it's because of the person behind those. So personal branding is incredibly important. Ultimately, people aren't going to buy a product or subscribe to something from somebody that they don't like or that they don't trust or who they feel is like selling snake oil. You know what I mean? I would say if I had two choices, if I was buying two sponges and one of them was more green friendly, I like the company, but I'm going to go for the brand that I like better, even if the two products are comparable and one of them is slightly cheaper, I'll still probably go for the one that I like better just from their branding. So, whether that's a person, whether it's a company, and again, it can transfer from the person to the company depending on how outspoken and well-known the CEO is. But I think we can all agree that's incredibly important.
Thank you so much for your time today, Liz.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.